Hello everyone, my name is Simone and I'm the founder of Northern Power Women, and I'm delighted to welcome you all to our Tuesday at 2 NPWLeader series. And this week I'm absolutely delighted that the just wonderful Jodie Hill is joined us for a chat. So welcome Jodie, thank you so much. Where are you in the world today?
So I'm in Leeds, not so sunny Leeds, like I said before, it's a bit grim down here, but yeah, in my little home office, like pretty much everybody is. You can see, oh, in fact, we've got someone outside. I like that. Yes.
Right, someone is outside. That's brilliant.
Yeah, I love that. I can't quite get myself to, when I'm presenting, to be outside, just in case it's quite windy where I am, and it's like, and everyone's like, "What are you saying?" So, yeah, I'm inside for presenting, but definitely outside when I'm watching. But yeah, thanks for having me.
Oh no, this is brilliant. And what we want to do is we want to hear about you. We want to hear what you're up to. We want to hear your top tips. We know that you are a massive advocate and passionate about mental health. It was Mental Health Awareness Week last week, and you were too busy. We were too busy to get you on the chat last week. So we wanted to make sure that we had a great conversation with you. And we want to talk about routines. We want to talk about lockdown, and then we want to hear from you on the chat. If you've got any questions that you want to throw in and want Jodie to speak on, then please drop it in the chat. I'll drop you a little note and I'll let you know when I'm coming your way. If we don't get to everybody, don't worry, we're going to follow up in the in a follow-up email as well. And this will be recorded so you can go back and watch it as well. So Jodie, I am delighted you've chosen to spend your Tuesday afternoon with us. Not all afternoon, don't worry everyone, you know. Really delighted. And we want to hear about, you've had such a phenomenal, you're an award-winning lawyer, but you've got this fantastic story, and I want you to share with everyone what your story is and why you're so passionate as well about mental health.
Course. Okay, so I started at the beginning of the kind of Thrive journey. So my law firm's called Thrive, and 2 years ago, just a bit longer than 2 years, March 2 years ago, I set up after the previous year having a mental breakdown. I suffer with anxiety and PTSD, and I was working in a busy firm, and just all of a sudden, I mean, I've been coping my entire life, and anyone who's experienced mental ill health will appreciate that sometimes things just come in waves, and just one day is just too much. And actually I went off sick in the January in 2017 and left my job. I'd never had a sick day before then as well, so it really annoyed me. And you know what it's like when you're obviously like in a law firm as well as women, you have to work even harder because it was all men that I worked with, so you really pushing yourself. And I pushed myself too far. I burnt out. I had a full-on breakdown. I couldn't leave my house. I was genuinely really, really poorly, and I didn't realise at the time how unwell I was. So I went back into therapy. My medication went up to 200 milligrams of sertraline. I was in such a bad place, and it's only now when I do talk about it and reflect on it that I kind of appreciate how bad it was, if that makes sense, because at the time I was just like, that's just my life. So I left my job, and I was kind of like, oh crap, I don't have anywhere to go. So I'd left my job, but I couldn't face having to deal with going back, if that makes sense. So I needed to work because I needed a sense of purpose, but I couldn't face going back to the environment that had caused me to have a breakdown. So I was in this like catch-22 situation because I wanted to get better. So I knew I needed to go back to work, because obviously having that sense of purpose and, you know, helping people is why I became a solicitor. But then my mental health just wouldn't let me go back. I just couldn't. So I left in the April time. In May, I started up as a consultant and started to kind of it was mainly because I could work remotely from home, and I worked what hours I wanted. And because I'd had a breakdown, I didn't want to be in a room full of loads of people. I needed to build my confidence back up. So over time, I did that over the summer. And before I knew it, I was actually like, I was at full capacity, and I was like, oh, actually, I can do this. And obviously, I was having therapy and all the other stuff, but I very quickly built my confidence up. And actually, my recovery was quite quick in the grand scheme of things. So I'd had the breakdown in the January, left my job in the April, and by October, November time, I was like, I'm going to set my own firm up. So yeah, everyone goes, you're mad, why would you do that after you've just had a breakdown? But actually what I couldn't do in another firm as a consultant, because you're kind of a bit invisible as a consultant, you kind of work in the background. What I couldn't do was have a real brand identity or a voice for the passion around mental health and about supporting women in business. So I decided I had to take that leap, and it was either join a firm, and I had offers from some of the top firms in Leeds, or set up on my own. And it was that point where I was like, well, I've got nothing to lose here, because I didn't have a job at the beginning of this year, so let's go for it. So I applied for an application to be a regulated law firm. It's quite a long, boring process, so I won't go into that. But then I was kind of, all of the feelings of self-doubt and I'm not good enough and all of that rubbish came back into my head, because I hadn't heard for a while, and I got to the point I was like, oh my god, I can't do this, because I was only 29. You know, the average age of a newly qualified lawyer is 35, and the average age of a partner is 60. So you know, I had quite a lot of things against me, and I hadn't been well, so I was definitely putting myself, I was like this, and I was like, shall I do it, shall I not? Anyway, I did it. On Christmas Eve, I was in Mexico, and I got an email from the SRA saying, you've got your application approved. I was absolutely buzzing, to say the least. And I was actually, it was the day I'd finished taking my medication as well. I'd managed to taper off. So like the most amazing day, because I'd got these two things that I'd worked really hard to get towards. So that was kind of the journey really over that year. That year was just literally a mental year. And then in the January, I came back from my holiday, and I just set the task of branding Thrive, and actually coming up with the name. And that was just all so exciting. So I wanted the name to embody who I was, what we were trying to achieve. And at the time it was just me. So it was kind of, you know, how do I get these ideas and thoughts on a page, and how do I get the colour? So it's my little brand just here. And I'm just really proud of how far we've come. So that was 2 years ago, and I've now got a team of 10, an office in Leeds and London. We've won a couple of awards for diversity and inclusion, and really just trying to take the lead and really show and lead by example that equality and diversity can be at the top of the agenda, and you can still do well in business. And I think that's really where we're different at Thrive, because most law firms are set up slightly differently. A lot of them say they do lots of things and don't, and we're trying to support people on their journey in their law firms, as in like the leaders in the law firm, to try and achieve true equality and diversity. Because what we're finding is, because I built the culture around it, it's quite easy for me to do, because everything that we do is focused around those core values. Whereas a lot of firms are trying to achieve something where they've already got a culture entrenched and an attitude, and it's really difficult for them to change. Not necessarily the people who are trying to do it, it's trying to change the culture of everybody else. So we're working with the Law Society. They invited me to London to have a roundtable to support the profession. Working with the SRO, which are a regulatory body, they've put me down as one of the mentors. We're the only small firm as well, which is really cool. It's all the big international firms. And what I want to show little firms is, doesn't matter how big you are, you can still be inclusive, you can still have a diverse workforce. You don't have to have a diversity and inclusion manager. And I think that's the shift that we need to get a lot of businesses towards, because actually a lot of businesses are SMEs, they are small. And I think that's a really, really important topic. And I know it's something that you do a lot on, Simone, as well. So that's kind of us in a nutshell. You know, that journey's been just, it's a roller coaster, now a corona coaster. And you know, lockdown's been really difficult, because I still have anxiety, I still find uncertainty really difficult, but we haven't furloughed anyone. Actually, we're really busy. We're running a free helpline. We've supported over 1,500 people for free since lockdown. Just trying to ease someone's anxiety, other people's anxiety, because actually we're all in this together. Everyone's like, what do we do? And when the rules keep changing, one of the things we were really mindful about was the impact that would have on mental health. So there's a lot of work that we're doing around that as well. So that's it in a nutshell.
Literally in a 2-year period, you've gone through a breakdown. So in your late 20s, newly qualified, what were the triggers in that breakdown? At what point did you kind of go, I've got a problem here? Did it take a long time to realise that?
So I was already on a lot of medication. I was already, 10 years into therapy. So I think for me, I hadn't realised how bad it had got, because I'd always had anxiety. I've dealt with it since a child. So I didn't get diagnosed in my 20s. And what what I was finding was actually my anxiety was getting worse, even though my medication was increasing, and even though I'd had therapy. And it was at that point where I couldn't get out of bed. Like, anyone that knows me, I get up at 5 a.m. and I'm out going for a run. So I know, and that's my therapy now, is my exercise. But having the inability to get out of bed was just, and I was beating myself up for it, because I was like, what are you doing? Like, that's not you. And it was like, it was so difficult, because I kind of knew what I was doing, but I didn't. And it was really hard to pull all of that together, because I just wasn't mentally able to do it. Physically, I wanted to get up, but mentally, my mind wouldn't let me get out of bed. So it was a real challenge, actually. And I couldn't leave the house. I became very antisocial, and I'm such a socialite when it normally, and I'm quite an extrovert. I like to be around people. So my mannerisms changed, my behaviours were changing, and I could just see myself sliding down. And that's why I couldn't go to work, because I couldn't physically get out of bed.
And did you recognise your own symptoms, or did someone have to point it out?
Yeah, I did it all. It was all on my own, to be honest. I lived on my own as well. And it was, it was really challenging, because I wasn't in a workplace where people did recognise those signs, or support if you asked for help. So it's very different if your colleagues, like at Thrive, we're all really open about our mental health. So if one of my team's really struggling at the moment, and he's happy to talk about this, so he doesn't mind me telling people, but he's got OCD, he's finding lockdown hard. So, we have check-ins, and I can notice in his mannerisms just how he is on the phone. There are certain things that I spot, and I know that he's not coping, whereas I didn't have that when I was in work. And that's why I've tried to create a culture of understanding. Everybody that works for me is mental health first aid trained as well, so we all are able to spot those signs to support each other, because actually doing that remotely is really hard, because you don't see people, and actually sometimes it's those little things when you're in a room with someone that make you notice. So yeah, there's definitely, when I come on to talk about some tips, I'll go through some ways in which people can support their team and their colleagues with their mental health in lockdown.
And two things from that, because I know this is a real campaign that you're driving at the moment, isn't it, about mental health first aid, which I'll come back to. But just staying on you a second, is that, who did you ask for help? If you recognised that there was a challenge here and you needed to do something, what did you do? Who did you ask?
So I went back to my GP. That was the first thing I did. At the time I'd already finished at the time. I'd finished my NHS allocated therapy. I had CBT, and I'd actually had 20 sessions. I think you only get like 12 normally, but they put me on like this higher thing with 20 sessions. So I'd already exhausted it all. So I went back to my GP and I said, look, I can't function. In fact, I actually had a telephone one, because I couldn't get to the GP. I actually called the doctors and I said, I need a telephone appointment. So they just increased my medication and said, we'll pop you on another waiting list. I mean, that was literally all that happened, because the support in the NHS is amazing in so many ways, but they're so under-resourced for mental health support. And it is really difficult, because the hardest thing is getting help and going and and then you get put on a waiting list. So you're like, great, so what do I do between now and then? They're like, just take these tablets. So unfortunately, that's kind of how you just have to deal with it in that way, because I couldn't afford, I was on sick, I don't get paid sick, so I couldn't afford private therapy, and so I was just looking after myself at home the best way I could. I managed to get on therapy by, I think it was July time, and I just got back onto CBT, which helped me to learn, just kind of revisit some of those triggers and understand. So CBT is cognitive behavioural therapy. It's something that the NHS support, and it just helps you with coping mechanisms, really. And once I'd got back onto that, I then started to get a bit of momentum, because I had someone to talk to. But it's quite difficult when you don't have that level of support, and the type of job that you are as a solicitor, it's very high pressure, it's long hours, very highly targeted, so it's incredibly difficult to do that when your brain is not working, because your brain is your job. So it's really, really hard.
And you talk about routine. I mean, we had a conversation, we swapped emails at probably 6 o'clock this morning, or half, and we were both on our walk. You'd just come back, I was on my walk. How important is exercise and routine to you?
It's everything, if I'm honest. I don't have medication because I do therapy which is my therapy, is my running, my training. So I do something every single day, even if it's just a walk. I have my dog, so I go out with him. But actually, for me, it's really, really important that I keep that up. And I still have therapy now. I actually have neuroplasticity now, which is a different type of therapy. It's not classed as a therapy here. It's like a rewiring of the brain to help with mindset. It's amazing. If anyone wants to know more, I can speak to you offline. But part of that, I see her every single week, and it's by video link. And part of that, she can tell, like, she'll literally talk to me. She's like, you haven't exercised in a couple of days. Like, if I haven't done it, like, it's noticeable in my mannerisms, everything. So for me, my relationship with exercise is really positive, and it's been really helpful for keeping my mind healthy. It also kind of gets me outside. So I've actually, in lockdown, I've actually started running, and I never run normally. So I like sports like netball and hockey and tennis and stuff like that, but I actually, my favorite thing is weight training. I literally lift really heavy, so I'm actually quite small, but everyone is like, what? That's quite a boys thing. But, you know, I just say find something that works for you. And I think the thing I like about it is each time you can get it slightly better, and you can kind of focus. And what I find is that's the only time my mind stops thinking about all the things and focuses on that. And I think that for me is something that I struggle with the amount of thoughts and kind of dealing with all of that, and I'm constantly going all the time, which is amazing to get a business going and, you know, to be entrepreneurial, but it's exhausting, and you need to be able to have those breaks. So the exercise actually for me is a break, and it allows my mind to have a rest, if that makes sense.
I have to say, I think that's one of the things over the last 9 weeks during this crazy time that we're in right now is that exercise for me. You know, probably everyone on this call, we're all running around doing, you know, our roles, our responsibilities, our caring, our dog walking, all that kind of stuff, running for trains, missing trains, all that kind of stuff. But I found that routine of absolutely getting up every morning and doing yoga, and Marie, who Rob and I, we do the yoga class together, and the one thing that she said to me is the hardest thing that you can ever learn in yoga is that lying still. So it's not necessarily about the biggest weight or the longest distance. It's finding your own bit, isn't it? And I'm definitely the busy running around crazy woman, and so for me to lie on a mat, and because it's a Zoom call, so it is very interactive. I get up for her, she gets up for us, kind of thing. And that is the thing I've observed most about you, is you have totally embraced this stillness, which probably some of you know me on here will go, I'm not so sure about that. But no.
But it has, you're right though, because with yoga, you're right, it isn't necessarily about how long you hold the pose, or it's about that the breath and actually stopping and breathing and just being present. And that we all struggle with that, and I think I struggle with that. And one of the things I've reconnected with as well, when we had a chat this morning, didn't we, and we were talking about it, and I've been doing yoga, and actually even if it's only 5-10 minutes, doing a little sun salutation or just something to kind of reconnect myself, and I found it's been really, really helpful. It's actually made me a little bit calmer and more patient as well, I found. Okay. I am kind of a million miles an hour, so sometimes I'm like, oh. So trying to calm me and slow me down a little bit has been really helpful. I think a lot of people have said in lockdown they've felt like they've slowed down a little bit because they've had to. Like normally, we were talking before about, you know, you're darting between city to city to city, you're on trains, you're all over the place. And actually, I've never been this at home this much. I'm like, my dog's loving it. He's like, how many walks do I get? But yeah, it definitely slows you down, and I agree. I think having the routine with the exercise as well. So I'm like you, I like to do it in the morning. I get up, I have my I actually journal in the morning, and write my gratitude list, and then I go out for a run, or I do some exercise, or I do some yoga, and sometimes I'll do 2. In fact, this morning I did 2 workouts, so but both just slightly shorter, and I mix it up and have them a couple of hours apart, and that's then represents a break. So if I start work at 5 a.m, which is what I do, it's good for me to have a break mid-morning, and that's when I do my exercise. Otherwise I'll just work all the way through, just because I love what I do and just don't stop.
So you talk about, you know, this business that you've grown, so coming through and surviving a mental breakdown,
Yeah.
and then you set this business up. You know, setting up a business is not the easiest thing in the world, particularly not in your industry as well. And now you've got literally a thriving team of 10. What's the culture that you've you've built this business on? You know, I always think there's that set, you know, what are those guiding principles? What are those values? How have you built this?
Yeah, so I think the culture is built very much on my personal values, actually, and it's all around supporting and empowering people with disabilities, women, minorities, and people with mental health problems. And it's because I've been a victim firsthand of discrimination, and I think it's a horrible position to be placed in, with someone with a disability and as a woman. And I wanted to create a workplace that had that to its core. So, you know, everything from recruitment to events to everything that we do has that at its core. And I think it is quite hard to achieve for a lot of businesses because they don't have that perspective. But because I've got the lived experience and because I've kind of been there before, it was for me, it was quite easy. It was natural. So yeah, I think for us as well, one of the key things I wanted to do was have social impact and social change. So I didn't just want us to be another law firm. I wanted it to be more of a community. So that's why we created all our different groups, our networking groups, our online groups. And we've really built up a lovely community within those separate groups, where we offer loads of free support and like kind of empowering and educating people rather than just telling people what to do. So I think lawyers tend to have a tendency to do that. And actually, if you empower people to make the right decisions, you have a much better outcome in the long term. And actually you have a much wider impact as well.
And I think during this time you've been nailing these daily newsletters and updates, especially in the early stages where the information was coming out of number 10, like Health for Leather, and like it was, here you go, here's the information and crack on with it tomorrow. So you absolutely have educated, I think, definitely the community I see and I'm involved with the F word, Jodie. How on earth did you get to grips with translating the whole furlough information? It became a moving feast, didn't it? You created an open helpline because I emailed you, didn't I, to kind of go, no idea what this F thing is.
Yeah, it was. So I mean, we actually set up the helpline. I set that up before lockdown because that was all around the kind of easing the anxiety stuff, and I didn't realise how mentally busy it was going to be. We're really lucky, actually. We have 3 work placement students who are working remotely who've been supporting us with that. And obviously my team, all of us work together on the helpline. We have a little process now where we all check it. So, you know, that's been invaluable for us to have to learn as well, because some of the questions we hadn't even thought about, you know, because actually some of these issues that are arising are really off the wall, and, you know, the government haven't thought about it. It's not in the guidance. So you know, we're really trying to pick our way through what is effectively new law every day. But actually, I love it. I absolutely love it. And I trained as a barrister, so I love getting into the law, and I teach at Leeds Beckett, so I love like kind of trying to teach, but I just love it. And actually being able to distill that into a really simple message, it is hard, but the amount of feedback, like you say, where we've just replied straight away, like it's been on the TV and then someone looks in their inbox and it's already there and they're like, oh, that's what we do. And actually being able to do that was part of, you know, what Thrive's about. It's about reducing all the legal jargon and just being really accessible and approachable. And at time of crisis, that's like, for me, that's the most important thing. People need our help now more than ever. And we might only be a tiny team, but it doesn't matter how big we are. We can still have that wider impact. And it helped with going on the news, then people actually saw the helpline. And actually, you know, having to do the media stuff meant that I had to know it, because they were asking me live on air and I had to know the answer. And actually I was thinking, this only came out yesterday. But, you know, it is about being authentic about it as well. And if you don't know the answer, it's being honest and saying, do you know what, we don't actually know that, but this is what we would suggest.
So tell us about your campaign. You've been campaigning for a wee while, haven't you, about mental health?
2 campaigns. So yeah, there's 2. So the first one was when we first came across each other, was when I set Thrive up. At the same time, I started a campaign to have mental health first aid as mandatory in the workplace, just like physical first aiders are. And that was actually debated in Parliament in January last year. So unfortunately, they don't want to make that compulsory, but what they have acknowledged is that the UK is in a serious situation with regards to mental health in the workplace, and that something needs to happen, but they don't think that will fix the problem, which I understand. It doesn't fix the entire problem. So what they want is a more solution driven and more proactive. They see mental health first aid as more as a reactive solution because it's more support around a crisis. So we've revisited that, and last year we launched our One Mind campaign, which is all around having wellbeing and mental health risk assessments made mandatory in the workplace. So at the moment, you have to do a stress risk assessment. So the HSE guidelines say it's mandatory to do a stress risk assessment, but my personal view on that is it doesn't really go far enough, because you don't find out enough data to really make any real impact with someone's mental health just by looking at stress, because there are lots of other factors, and you need a more holistic approach. So we've been campaigning for that. We're working with a couple of different companies on that now as well, where we've actually come across another company who has been campaigning in a similar way. So we're just trying to collaborate with other organisations. Obviously now nothing's going to happen given what's going on with the pandemic, but moving forward, I think, you know, government acknowledged that the impact of everything that's happened, we already were in a bad state with our mental health in the UK. It was bad. We'd actually increased the cost to employers from the previous year, so it was getting worse progressively. So this impact is going to be profound, and I think the only way you can really understand the mental health of your team is to ask them. But if you ask them a question, they're unlikely to tell you the answer. So what we're suggesting is that you do it through anonymously through tech, and allow that tech to analyse the data on the basis that, one, you don't have to do it as a manager and sit down, because that individual is not going to tell you unless your culture's open. And two, if it's anonymous, they're more likely to be as open and as honest as possible about the causes of their mental ill health, and some of that might not be work. So it's about understanding that, and what those risk assessments do is identify the percentage of people who have conditions in the workplace. It also produces a self-assessment report for that individual, so it's bespoke on how they can improve their own well-being. But my favourite part of the report is all around the employers section, because it tells you the 3 key areas that you should work on for your business. So rather than just chucking loads of money at, like, I love yoga, but rather than putting yoga on for everybody, like let's use the little bit of money that people have left to really support people, and use the data from these assessments to establish where is best to spend that money. And so actually I think this more targeted approach is a much better way, because you're empowering people. You're saying, what do you need? Rather than just assuming what people need, you're actually finding the gaps in your organisation. So this is a really proactive approach, and it's in line with the HSE guidance, but it's just elaborating and making it more inclusive around all disabilities rather than just stress. So that's kind of it in a nutshell, really. But there's loads of stuff on our website about it if anyone wants to get involved, and we will be ramping that up in due course, because I think it is really important that this is something that's pushed by government. And it'd be really helpful if government could support something that employers could use, because if employers had a tool that they could use to do this, then they would definitely do it, wouldn't they? I mean, half the battle is the cost, and half the battle is knowing what to say or what to ask. And so I think if you can have a more coherent or some, I don't know, even if it's just a document that they can put into a survey monkey, just some guidance around it. I think it's just really hard for employers. Employers want to do something, but they just don't often know what to do or what they're allowed to ask questions about. And I think that's where tech can really, really support businesses at this time, I think.
Well, we'll put that link on their follow-up email as well, Jodie. But I've got a question. I'm going to keep it anonymous, this question, but how can you influence your organisation to take mental health more seriously? I've got an individual who was pushing for more support for employees during Mental Health Awareness Week last week. However, the HR department are not doing anything proactive with employees, especially because so many are working from home or furloughed. Do you think it's been used as an excuse not to do?
Yeah, it's so bad. So I actually think you should do more because people are furloughed or home working, because you're not seeing them. You need that sense of community. You don't have that when everyone's working from home. And especially, you've got different challenges. People who are furloughed feel like, I don't know if I've got a job to go back to. I'm bored. I've not got a sense of purpose. That can impact on mental health. they might have to deal with childcare, they might have less finances. There's all these factors. Then you've got working from home. That's isolating, and people are working more hours. You also might have to homeschool while working from home. Impossible. So, you know, there more than ever, people need support. So I think it's wrong that businesses do that. I know that doesn't answer the question, and I will answer the question. But I do think it's wrong that businesses aren't supporting people with mental health right now, because there are so many things that they can do that don't cost anything as well. So in terms of how to get that support, I think from my perspective, when I've been supporting individuals in this area before, it's about finding things that don't cost anything, and finding a business case. So putting a business case together. Now, there's a report called the Thriving at Work report, not done by me, by the way, but good, great name. And it was Paul Farmer, who's the CEO of Mind, and Stevenson. They did an amazing report. They've updated it with the Deloitte figures this year. And basically, there's loads of statistics in there which are really, really helpful for you to look at the return on investment. So if businesses don't care, show them the money, because they will care when they see the bottom line. Okay, so there's two angles here. There's the human angle, and then there's the fact that actually it pays to invest in your people, and it pays to invest in mental health, because when we're mentally well, we're much more productive, we're less likely to have time off, we're more present. So there's that. There's also things like, so one of the things that I'm launching at the moment, I'm the chair of This Is Me for Yorkshire, and we're about to launch in October. This Is Me is a pioneering campaign that is pretty much everywhere in the UK now, apart from Yorkshire, and it's in Scotland as well. And it's a free campaign that you can join. You use the green ribbon, which people have probably seen in Mental Health Week. There's loads of free resources on the website, and there's stuff around storytelling. So that things like, I tell my story all the time, so they approached me to launch Yorkshire. And then there's loads of free toolkits on there. So like look for free campaigns. There's time to talk. There's all the free stuff. If HR, because what they'll do is they'll fight back because, oh, I don't have anybody, or I don't have any time. We'll find stuff that's pre-packed and done, and then there's no excuse then. Make it as easy as possible and show them the business case. And there are, you know, there's loads of training and stuff that you can get that you'll have to pay for, but I think the starting thing is look at those campaigns that are there. This Is Me, like I say, a mindful employer, Time to Change. I'll provide all the links for the stuff, the people that we work with, because there's just so much free support out there that there's really no excuse not to do anything. And I think if your staff are asking for it, if anyone's in a leadership position, I'd be asking questions like, why do you want this? What can we do? How can we do it together? And you know, if you're trying to drive it, say to them, I'll be the mental health champion. I'll drive this. Just give me the go, and take that responsibility. And what we find is in the organisations who do it well, it's not necessarily the leadership team. It's somebody else who's championing it because they've had lived experience, or they're the ones that are on a committee for one of these charities. So yeah, I think there's quite a few different things that you can do, but definitely tap into those free resources because they're invaluable.
I think if there's no one size fits all solution, is there? So I think by offering those different resources, because I think, is it right that mental health absenteeism costs the UK economy like £8.4 billion per annum, and
Crazy, yeah.
300,000 people with long-term mental health conditions ultimately will then lose their jobs, and not everybody has got that bounce or that early morning journaling.
Didn't have it then, I tell you what, it's taken a lot to get to that point. But it's true, and you know, a lot of people, you know, I didn't have children to think about or anything like that. So, you know, people have different challenges, and you know, some people can't bounce back as quick because the nature of their condition, their circumstances, just all sorts of different variations. But you're right, you know, the impact is huge on the economy, it's huge on employers, and it's increasing. So you know that if people don't invest in their team, then they're unlikely to see a return on that investment in terms of, you know, retaining those people. People are looking for more than money right now. They want flexibility, they want employers that care. It's a really difficult time, and I think there's a lot of people reassessing how their employers made them feel right now, rather than necessarily how much they were paid on furlough. So I think I'm noticing a shift on, you know, some people are happy to take the 8% pay, but they still want to be part of a community and feel like they're not forgotten. We've got this whole thing around the forgotten furloughed, and actually it's a real problem. It causes social isolation. It causes people to feel disengaged and demotivated. And what employers need to think about is, how do we how do we transition back? If you've not spoke to those people and you've allowed training for everybody who's still working and not the furlough or not the home working, what do you want them to just pop back into work after 4 months and just expect them to be fine? Because it won't be. They won't be engaged. There'll be real issues. So I think there's a lot to take on board, but actually these small things, by doing things on Mental Health Awareness Week, by doing an initiative each week, just by emailing and keeping up to date with people, it's the small consistent things that really make a difference, and actually they don't cost anything. So
well, Jodie, the anonymous question that came, information has been put in front of HR and they've been quite reluctant to send it out. So our person is going to suggest being a mental health champion. So I think this is that empowering, if you like, from within, which is, so it's not, it just doesn't have to sit at the top. It can actually be embraced from within, I think.
Yeah.
Patrick, aka Michelle, I know you've had a journey, but I think Jodie's answered most of those for you. Anything else you want to add, Michelle? I'm just coming to you. Just let me unmute you if I can. I can hear you. No?
Oh, can you hear me? Sorry, I can't hear you, Simone.
Yeah.
Sorry, I apologise. Whether it's because I'm a long way from my Wi-Fi. Yeah, no. I just wanted to congratulate you, Jodie, because you got out.
Yeah.
I did the same, but it was back. I'm quite saddened though too, because it was back in 2004. Exactly the same happened to me as a lawyer with Waitman's. Nothing against Waitman's. It was just in those days, again, nobody talked about mental health. I didn't even realise what was happening to me. I got anxiety by being signed off with anxiety. Just nobody talked about it. But I'm just quite sad that the fact it just feels like it hasn't moved on. It's great that you found that gap to hit it head on, but I just find it incredible that
still happening
you
everywhere.
still have to do it.
we represent a lot of people in these positions. I'm one of it. So my firm actually we represent people in these conditions. So it's mental health in the workplace, Equality Act, and employment law. So I actually specialise in the law in this area as well. So I had kind of the lived experience, and now I'm seeing this. So I actually see this all the time. It's what I deal with on a day-to-day. So it is incredibly scary, the amount of people who are coming to me with these same problems, and I'm like, to me it just seems so obvious, like what the employer needs to do, and the amount of employers that refuse to make adjustments or refuse to allow you to work from home. But guess what, you're allowed now, because it works now. Yeah.
I've been advocating it for years, but I've been back and now I'm going, hello, I'm finally, people are listening.
It's the home working revolution. But the reality is, there's a lot of employers are going to have to rethink now, because they can't do the blanket, we're not allowing you to work from home, because they now have shown that it is possible. So that whole blanket refusal has got to go when it comes. And actually, working from home is really good for your mental health for some people, but not for others. So again, don't just assume what somebody wants. Everybody's different, and they manage their days differently. I personally prefer working at home because I can't deal with noise. I like to get up early, and I like to do what I like to do, and I like to have my day planned so that I'm able to support everyone in the way that I need to. Otherwise, I'll be on the phone all day, and I'll never get anything done.
Just quickly, and the other thing I just was slightly when you said and it is great that the people within the businesses want to embrace it, but I do think it's come from the leadership.
Yeah, you do need that buy-in, definitely.
You definitely do, because certainly again, I've gone from mainly being a consultant in the 15 years or so I've been in business, but the last couple of years I did go back into employment. I have now left again for similar reasons, just because you just go, I cannot believe these issues aren't being completely embraced and acknowledged, and the support just is not there. And this was a big company.
So this is really good for that, because it's the leaders who share the videos. So that's how you get your leadership buy-in. You get the senior management to share their story, and how they might all have completely different stories, but the point is that they've still made it to where they are, and it's achieved, like success is achievable, and it's giving people that hope. So that's why I think This Is Me really works, because it's a three-pronged approach, with practical skills, a visible sign with the badges and all the green stuff that they put up, but also the storytelling. Storytelling is so powerful, and you're right. If you don't have that senior leadership buy-in, there's only so much you can do. But I think if you're able to champion it within your workplace, you can then work on getting senior leadership buy-in, because you can show the impact it's having. So it's a way in, I think, kind of getting someone to champion that and start those initiatives. But ultimately it won't have the optimum effect unless you have that buy-in from the top, because you need them to be leading by example ultimately. Otherwise it's disingenuous when people, unless people will engage as well, because they'll be like, oh, this is just a tick box, I'm not doing this.
Thanks, Michelle. Andrea, I'm coming to you, if I may. You should be unmuted.
I am. One of the comments that, or one of my observations, so I do a weekly call with all my salaried team. It's like 15 of us, and we do it around 4 o'clock to 5 o'clock on a Friday, so everyone can have a drink, a bit more relaxed. We cover half the session about an update from me, whether, not that I had many updates over the last weeks, but what the plans were, what things were happening within the business. And then we went to socially, where we'd go around, look at people's dogs and family and everything. And then 2 weeks ago, I started talking about, I'm in hospitality, that, we would potentially need to start bringing a couple of people back. And one of my very good managers, who is vivacious and just forward thinking, just messaged me, and she said, I've got FOGO. Well, I'd never heard of FOGO at the time, just fear of going out. And she hadn't stepped outside of her house for 5 weeks. Her husband did the shopping, or a partner did the shopping, and she went into the garden, to the house, to the garden, to the house. So we have started, and she has to take photographs for me every day. She has to get in a car, and she has to drive to a different destination. And this week's goal is to drive to her restaurant that she runs and take a picture of the outside. I can't even get her to go in there yet, because she's built up this whole fear. She can't tell me what it is. So we're just doing step by step, and then this week she's going to open the shutter but not go in. So the impact is absolutely huge. So I'm dealing with all this stuff over here with furloughing and landlords, and then you start to open the door about the reality of the impact on humans.
It's a long-term impact as well. It'll take ages to get out of that, but I can relate to that. I went to the shop for the first time this weekend. Like, I haven't been anywhere. Like, I've been out for my run around the track and I'd not been in my car, hadn't been anywhere. And my other half was amazing because he was doing the shopping, but I was like, I don't think I can go to the shop. And I was like, what's wrong with me? Because that's not me. I like to go to the shop, but there was just something, and like she said, you couldn't quite put my finger on it. But I went to the shop this week, and I was so proud of myself. But the reality is, there's so many people that I speak to that are like, I'd just rather not go out. I'd rather stay in.
But I think my message here to everybody is, one, what you just said, don't assume everyone's okay, and really dig deep into how they are and how the process is going to be about going back to the office or going back to whatever it's going to be. And the needs, a little bit like if you've been poorly and been off long-term sick, you have an integrated process to go back into the workplace. Well, actually, I don't think coming off furlough is any different. It needs an integrated approach. Otherwise, it will be...
I think we're going to get an announcement this week about the phased return for furlough as well. So I don't know if anyone's seen, or they might have seen on the news, they were talking about having furlough extended all the way to the end of July, but then from August to October having the ability to have a phased return, so you part furlough, part working. And I actually think that's a really good idea, because I think some people will find it hard just to go from being furloughed for all that time, and like you say, maybe never been out, to then that transition back to work. So watch this space this week. It should be announced this week what the new rules are. So
I also think it's not just the people that have been furloughed, it's the people working from home. Even though they've been actively on a computer, maybe doing Zoom, but they haven't gone out of their comfort zone. So it's really the comfort zone to be something to be aware. I'm learning every day about it, and you've got to take it step by step. And as you quite rightly said, keep it individual and listen to the people.
Absolutely. And it's so important that you do that, because if you don't, you could treat everybody the same, you're going to actually probably help no one. That's the issue, is that it takes a few minutes to ask somebody. And I always say as well, when you're asking people remotely, don't just do, how are you? Yeah, fine. Yeah, straight into work. It's really ask someone how they are. And I always say, don't ask once, don't ask twice, ask 3 times. Because what I found is when I actually ask the second and third time, that's when they're like, actually, I didn't sleep very well last night, or actually, haven't been able to go to the shop, or, you know, then they're the questions that actually get you the answers you need, because our automatic responses to go, especially when you're on a Zoom call or a business meeting, is yeah, fine, and what we're talking about, and you go straight into business. So I think that's a really important thing when you're talking to your team.
Thanks, Andrea. I've got another question for you I'm going to come to you, Marina. You should be unmuted.
Hi, everyone. So Jodie, thank you very much for sharing a lot what have been suggesting. One of the questions I had was leadership in my organization is really committed to this initiative, and we started having conversations before COVID, and then we haven't initiated a mental health champion, which is one of the things I think would help bring that about. I work actually in a very male-dominated organization, but it's a small business. And a lot of them have expressed to me personally that they would like to continue these conversations, and it will probably be my responsibility to initiate. So I'm just wondering, how do you recommend starting with group settings, or we have a senior management system where we have one-to-one check-ins, but that's a little bit different because sometimes that can be majority work rather than mental well-being. We had a conversation in February, an HR connection of ours came in and he just put a couple of questions on the board. And I was so surprised how much my male colleagues are actually struggling more than I thought they were. And I always took it as, well, they're not stressed. They don't come into the office like me, where I'm like, oh.
We're more outwardly stressed, and we're more vocal about the impact, I think, as a woman. But actually, you know, more men die from suicide under the age of 40 than any other disease. So it's, you know, if the statistics are there, actually the men are really severely impacted because they don't talk. But I do think, so was your question more about how to approach it?
Well, how do you approach it over now virtually? Because it doesn't look like many of us will be returning to to an office space too soon. And that's one of the things my bosses and I have talked about, is what a lot of the stuff you said today was the signs. Like, I had a really hard, I finally was like, I called in essentially asking for a holiday last week, and that set off alarms because everyone was like,
Yeah.
And then I didn't realize that they were paying attention so closely to my mannerisms. And then I was thinking on what you were saying, based on a lot of conversations that I've had with my male colleagues, I'm sitting here worried thinking, damn, like, I haven't checked in with so-and-so and several times. Maybe I need to push my bosses to think about an actual process. So I was just wondering, how do you get started? Like, it's such a, to me, it's such an intangible topic that I don't.
Yeah, I think you're right. It is. It's a really difficult topic, and it depends what you're trying to achieve. I think from my perspective, I always say start with mental health or wellbeing risk assessments, because you can understand then what you're dealing with and where the gaps are in your organization. So it makes it really, really personal to your organization, rather than, there's not just a one-stop shop. I can't say just go download this or go see this company. And actually, the more bespoke it is, and the more data that you get from your workforce before you put a strategy in place, I think it's going to have a better impact. So I would start with that in mind, and then from that you should be able to then identify what training or what type of support, or whether or not people, because for example with my team, some people want a video call every week. Other people are like, I'll just call you when I want to, and so I just check in with them sporadically. Some people don't like a fixed time to check in. They find it a bit intrusive to be on a video all the time. So it's about finding what works as well. So your strategy will probably be different for different individuals. It goes back to what Andrea and I were saying before, you know, asking those individuals. And if you're a small company, you can probably achieve that. if management are already on, you know, taking that seriously, I think that's half the battle. It's now really about coming up with a strategy and a way that will work for your business. So I definitely have a look at that, and I'm happy for you to email me offline, and I'm more than happy to share some of the resources that we've used and some of the strategies that we've used that have really helped us. Like I say, we're only a small company, but we work with a range of companies and we've supported them. So I'm more than happy to share the free resources that we've used, and if that helps you along the way, then, you know, at least it's a starting point.
Great, thank you. I never would have guessed about the gathering data. Makes the most sense. Gathering what everybody is feeling, because I could just assume.
Yeah, and I think that we do assume, because but with the best intentions, we assume what people need. And actually, it seems so simple to say, just ask people, but it's the way you ask and the type of question. So, you know, to get the right data, you're going to have to approach it in a way that people will tell you honestly how they feel.
Yeah.
So trying to do things using technology is obviously really helpful. And actually, you can't see anyone face to face now anyway, but probably having a video call and saying, how would you like it? You know, do you have a mental health problem? Is probably not going to work. Especially with guys, because they'll be like, yeah. So there are definitely ways in which to do that. And it's not necessarily, you know, well, it's more about how you say it and how you collate that data.
Yeah.
And then what you do with it. And actually you might not need to do an awful lot. It might just be tweaking the way that you're already doing things. So yeah, I think that's probably the starting point. But yeah, like I say, I'm happy to speak offline.
Great, thank you very much.
Connect you offline. Thanks, Marina. And thanks, Martina. You've just dropped in here. It's really important at the moment that we are intentional when we're connecting with our colleagues, rather than just that kind of sweeping, oh yeah, you'll all be fine and everything. Listen, I can't believe the time is like running away from us. So I'm going to come to you, Jodie, for you've got to have some top tips. You've shared with us some great insight. You've been really honest and open for us this afternoon, and really appreciate it. But your top tips.
Okay, so what for managing mental health? Yeah. Okay, so my top tips for managing me, I'll give a couple for me and a couple for team. So for me, it's my exercise, it's a routine, and it's having a designated workspace. I think having that routine is so important. And even if it's just that you make sure you have those breaks at a certain time, like I have my little coffee and a cake in the afternoon, and you know, I have to make those breaks, because otherwise the time just goes, and the impact over time is really significant on your mental health. Journaling's been really helpful. It's really small journal, but basically I don't write loads because I don't have time, but I write like just a small, every day I just write the 3 things I'm grateful for, the 3 main goals for my day, and then I write my to-do list out, and it just really focuses my mind at the beginning of the day, and then at the end of the day I go back to that and I write my 3 wins for the day. So I'm starting it on a positive, I'm ending on a positive, so even if the day's been completely crap, I've ended it really well. And then for my colleagues, I think for managing your team, I think it is about asking them how they want to be communicated and how often, and that's really important. And really ask the right questions when you're checking in on people. Everybody struggles at different times. We're all on this roller coaster. So, you know, sometimes I've got one employee who's like up here, and then one's down here, and they're all over the place. And it's about making sure you give everybody the time that they need, and actually investing in mental health. So I sent all my team a little card in the post saying I was really grateful for them. And then they just got like a random gift in the post. Like I just sent them little things. Like, I'm not being paid at the moment. I've had to sacrifice my salary, and it's been really tough, but they didn't cost very much. It was a really small token, and it meant so much to them. And one of them had actually rang me and was like, they were actually crying because they were like, I can't believe this, I was having a really bad day and you didn't even know, and the card just arrived. And you know, you just don't know what people are going through, and it's those little tiny things that can make such an impact on somebody. And then the other thing that we're doing as well is we're about to launch our own wellbeing platform, which has got mental health champion training built in, and it's got modules for people to complete, and it's got wellbeing policies, template documents, everything. And we're launching that this month, in June. So we've been building tech to support people, and we should be able to launch that, like I say, in June. So that's something my staff have all been involved in and helping, and they've been trialing it. They've been my little guinea pigs, so they've loved it. And you know, it's built with mental health at its core. So yeah, stuff like that. There's loads of initiatives around. I think definitely get involved in initiatives if you can, and don't just do stuff on Mental Health Week. It's consistency. I love Mental Health Week because I think it's great how much airtime it gets, but don't make it a tick box with staff, because they can see straight through it and it just doesn't work. So yeah, that's kind of a lot of tips. I'm just rambling now. But no, thank you so much for having me. And if anyone wants any information about the companies we use, you know, I'm more than happy to share, to introduce you to people and stuff offline. So just contact me. Absolutely fine. And you are I am Jodie Hill on Twitter. Is that correct? Yeah. You've also got jodiehill.co.uk. So if you go on thrivelaw.co.uk, there's all stuff about all the risk assessments and the campaign, and then our Twitter and Instagram is I am Jodie Hill and thrive_law. If you want to follow us on social, we're always ranting about stuff. And if you've taken any of the tips away from today, like, so Heather's just popped in that she likes the idea for a journal. I love the idea. I mental block about writing lots of stuff down, but to do I quite like the idea to do a win at the start and a win at the end. I love that. And I particularly like coffee and cake in the afternoon as well, which resonates. I want to thank you, Jodie, on behalf of everyone on the call this afternoon. Really appreciate you sharing your tips, your story, your advice, your guidance, and I know you're very generous with your time. So thank you all. As I say, please stay connected. When you want us to check this platform out, please share that out. And we'll put some of those links in the follow-up email as well. But thank you. Anu, I keep seeing Anu in the lovely sunshine there. Please enjoy that lovely sunshine. Yeah. We're getting some lovely thanks here from Jessica, from Anu, from Jackie, from Zoe. So thanks everyone. Any questions, please get in touch and we can try and help support. But thank you all, and thank you, Jodie. You've been amazing. Thank you. See you later. Bye. See you, bye now. Bye.